Hi, today we're going to be talking about irrational numbers. First, we want to talk about what a rational number is so that you might better understand what an irrational number is. Rational numbers basically include everything you've done up until now. It includes all of the integers, all of the fractions, and all of the decimals that are either terminating or repeating. So that's basically everything you've dealt with up until now. The definition of irrational numbers is any number that cannot be written in the form a over b, where both a and b are integers. So what does that mean to us? Some examples of irrational numbers are the square roots of any number that does not have a square root. So for example, we could say the square root of 2, or the square root of 5, square root of 6. Since those numbers are not perfect squares, their square root of them is irrational. Another number that is irrational is pi. Pi, even though we might talk about it as 3.145, it actually is a number that goes on and on and on forever. So pi is a very famous irrational number. Now we want to graph some of our irrational numbers on a number line, because even though we don't see them regularly, they are a number that goes on a number line. So in order to figure out how to put the square root of 2 on a number line, we first need to figure out between what two whole numbers the square root of 2 would belong. So right now we have the square root of 2. We know that the square root of 2 is going to be greater than the square root of 1. We know that the square root of 2 is going to be less than the square root of 4. So on the left and right of the square root of 2, we have two perfect squares. The square root of 1 we know is 1 because 1 squared equals 1. We don't know what the square root of 2 is yet. And the square root of 4 we know is 2. So we know that somewhere the square root of 2 is going to be somewhere in between 1 and 2, but we don't know exactly where. In order to figure out exactly where the square root of 2 would go on a number line, you're really going to have to use your calculator. Plugging the square root of 2 into my calculator, I get that the square root of 2 equals, it's actually, I'm going to change that to approximately because I am going to round, is approximately 1.414. And of course I know that because the square root of 2 is irrational, as a decimal it actually will go on and on and on forever. It is not terminating or repeating. So now I could draw my number line. So here I have my number line. I know that 1.414 ... is going to be in between the 1 and the 2. And it's going to be to the left of the 1.5. The 1.5 is right here. So looking to the left of the 1.5, but to the right of the 1.25, I'm going to put my dot right about here. And that should be about 1.414 ... So I can say that that is the square root of 2. Occasionally you might find a square root that has a negative on the outside. It is then asking you for the negative value of the square root. Right now you won't ever deal with negatives inside the radical because, as you know, any perfect square has to be positive. So for right now we're going to say you can't take the square root of a negative number. So here this is asking between what two whole numbers negative the square root of 12 would be. Well, we know if we start with negative the square root of 12, negative the square root of 12, we know that negative the square root of 12 is greater than negative the square root of 16. 16 is a perfect square. Negative the square root of 12 is less than negative the square root of 9. 9 and 16 are the two perfect squares that 12 is between. So I know that the square root of 16 is 4, so negative the square root of 16 will be negative 4. We don't know what the negative square root of 12 is. And this is negative 3. So we know that negative the square root of 12 will be between negative 3 and negative 4. If this was asking me to put this on a number line, I would then substitute that negative square root of 12 into my calculator in order to get an exact or close to exact number. We're going to have you do some problems now. If you have any questions, ask us in class tomorrow. Thanks. Hope you learned about irrational numbers.